Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to today's Art Talk with the amazing multimedia artist Gianna DiBartolomeo, also known as Gianna D. Welcome to Miami Beach Urban Studios Live Art Talk. I'm Colette Mello. I'd like to give a very special thank you to our sponsor, the City of Miami Beach of Tourism and Office of Cultural Affairs, for making these art talks possible. Gianna D is a native Miamian and is a material and process-driven artist. She works in mediums such as paint, photography, embroidery, beads, crayons, and even cafecito cups. Her mixed media works and installations are colorful and have a joie de vivre quality. Her work has been shown internationally and nationally. In 2020, she completed the public art projects I Am Miami at Dadeland Mall and the special FIU Online Beautifully Miami project. In 2019, she was part of the Doral Contemporary Art Museum exhibition, Women of Vision. In 2018, she was part of the Venice and Gables Public Art Project. And in 2017, the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens CAP Artist Program. She's also exhibited here at Miami Beach Urban Studios under the curation of FIU MFA alum Danielle Damas. Gianna is very generous with her time and artwork. She volunteers at local schools and as visiting artist, and she donates artworks to charitable and nonprofit organizations for fundraising activities. Gianna has a Master's of Fine Arts degree from Florida International University. She is a FIU Ratcliffe Fellow, and she is represented by the Ryan James Fine Arts Gallery. Before I hand it over to Gianna, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that if you have comments or questions, to make them through the chat function, and we'll try to integrate them throughout our conversation. So, hi, Gianna. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm really looking forward to this presentation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can go ahead and start sharing your screen.
Okay, let's see if I could get this right. Okay. Is it shared?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you all for attending. Let's get right into it. So I do a lot of.
I'm sorry, I wanted to interrupt you right away. Where are you? Tell us where you are.
Yeah. I'm in my studio. So I got some work behind me, stuff I'm playing around with. And after the presentation, some work I need to work on. So okay. I am in my studio. So I do a lot of different things. And so for this presentation, I really wanted to discuss the three main cornerstones of my work that unify my practice. So although my work is varied, there is a common thread tying everything together, and I wanted to share that today. So there's always a why, what, and how to my work. And so I want to describe these three elements and show how they work in three different recent projects of mine. If you'll notice, the why is always on the top because it's always important for me to, number one, ask myself, why am I making this work? What is it that I'm trying to say? And that's always going to be the main driving force for my work. If I don't have anything to say, or if I can't clarify within myself, what is the message I'm trying to convey, the work's not ready to make. So my why is my backstory or my concept. I'm inspired by everyday life, and it could be something very monumental, like the death of a close friend, or it could be something small, like an inspiration from a perfect stranger. And so nothing is too big or too small for me to begin to investigate. Not sure why, can't change the slide. There we go, okay. So this photo is from my series Tread, where I was consciously observing the ground where I was walking. Okay, and so from this series, it was all inspired by me earning my motorcycle's license. And they were telling us to be observant of the road in which you're traveling, because if you're traveling in a car, you may not notice things that could be really dangerous for you on a motorcycle. So the inspiration was looking at the ground, is what it started as. And then I began to look very closely at the ground and started noticing that the ground looked like abstract paintings to me. And so I began documenting what I was seeing. And so my artwork is talking about things that are currently on my mind. I am taking the vulnerable step of putting myself out there going, hey, these are my experiences. This is what's on my mind. This is my perspective. And I'm sharing it with the viewers, allowing them to see themselves or not in my work. I feel like making my work is the monologue and sharing the work is the conversation. My what are my materials? Although my work is steeped in personal history, the materials I use are easily recognizable and generally come charged with specific associations for viewers. And this is intentional because when the work is complete, it transcends its original meaning. I'm making the work for one reason, but I'm creating the space for viewers to see something else as well. So an example of this would be this piece. I was making miniature small houses, and I was talking about their little paper houses. And I was talking about family and the fragility of life. But when I made the piece and was showing it, somebody came up to me and said that the work really resonated with them. And so we just started discussing. And the work really resonated with him because he had just become a mortgage broker. And so all the classes he had taken and all the material he had learned, it was all coming to him. He was seeing that material in the work. He was seeing about the real estate market, different lives and houses, and the transferring of the memories between the people. And I just thought that was a really wonderful example of how I'm making the work for my reasons, but still giving the space for someone else to attach their own meaning and get something out of the work. And it created an experience where we could both come together and discuss our point of views. It also makes sense to me that if I am talking about my personal experiences or everyday life, that I should be using the materials from everyday life. So this piece is actually made of little army men. And so here I'm talking about fighting for something that's really important to you. And that sometimes it's okay to fight and have and fight these battles because it's a really important fight for you to take. So the point is I was using materials from every day in the piece. And also, I'm really interested in my materials because I think there's a lot of people are intimidated by art. And so by using familiar materials, I'm creating like an accessibility ramp, if you will. And I'm trying to get rid of the elitism and the stuffiness. And I'm trying to create an atmosphere that allows people to approach the art. If you're familiar with something, there's going to be a little bit more curiosity about it than these barriers. And so I'm trying to knock down the barriers and create accessibility with my materials. How is my process? My work is process oriented and it usually involves a lot of repetition. And there are a few reasons for my choices. So first off, I am totally resisting the information overloaded culture in which we live. My work is made by hand. It usually takes me forever. And then on top of it, I'm a really slow worker. So it's on top of that, the work is textural. It doesn't necessarily reproduce well. It's made to be seen in person. So I am doing all these things because there's a quote by a writer, Jeanette Winterson, who said that one of the casualties of progress is peace and quiet. And so in my process, I am creating that luxury to have peace and quiet to be able to make my work. And I'm creating that in my practice.
And that image is from here at MBUS, if I remember correctly, right?
That is.
Okay,
I
remember
yes.
that. Yeah. And you're very organized as well.
Yes.
Very organized.
That's fun for me.
Yeah.
So also through the repetition, I'm making an overarching larger statement with my works. It's this idea that one thing, one mark, one daily action may not seem like a lot, but when combined, they are forming the landscape of our lives. So this happens on an individual level where maybe you eat healthy once and you think, oh, no big deal. And then you do it again and again. And before you know it, it's a week, it's a few weeks, it's a month, it's a year, it's a habit, it's a lifestyle. And this also happens on a community level. I do something, I'm picking up litter or I recycle, you're picking up litter, recycling, and it creates a larger picture. And I think sometimes when you're in it, it's hard to feel like you're making that difference. And by stepping back and seeing the whole picture, you can really see how each mark does matter. Your little bit does count. It adds to the total impact. And so now that we have the why, what, how, I want to show how it actually works in a series. So this is my Touch from Above series at the airport. And this was really special to me because showing at the airport was a bucket list item for me. So to finally be able to do it, I was really excited to have this opportunity. And so this series is inspired by random acts of kindness. And a complete stranger came up to me, gave a random act of kindness, and it totally turned around my whole day, and it stuck with me. And so I was trying to figure out how to capture this feeling. What does it look like when somebody does something nice for you? What was that feeling visually? And so for me, it looks something sweet like frosting. And so the works are like overhead shots of the world where everyone is spreading a little kindness. And sometimes the kindness is subtle. So some works in this series are more monochrome. Not everything has to be bright and flashy. Sometimes being a listening ear can really go a long way. And so I want to show the nuances in the work. And so the series has works that are brightly colored and some more monochrome in colors, and they vary.
I love these works. I remember seeing them before. I didn't know they were about kindness, so that's wonderful. Makes
Okay. And so you can see that my backstory, my why, is informing my what using something that looks like frosting. And then my how is this intensive process where I'm filling in all the spaces and they dry and they shrink and I have to go back in. And so, because I'm trying to really show that if each person did their part and added their dollop or act of kindness, what a beautiful world we would live in. And it also just kind of shows, once again, it's like that step back to show like every dot counts. Your part is necessary. And so the next project I want to talk about was the Beautifully Miami project that was commissioned by FIU Online. And this was a little different because it was more of a collaboration. FIU Online had a message that they wanted to convey, and I had to work within those parameters. But luckily, what they wanted to convey, the beauty of Miami and using the resources right in front of you, was like perfectly up my alley. So I felt like we really aligned. So what I proposed was doing a pixelated image where the pixels were each cafecito cups. And I wanted the image to be something fun. And they wanted something to be very easily recognizable as Miami. So we combined to agree to do a beach tower. And so, of course, I amped up those colors. And the cafecito cups read as very Miami, but it also at the same time challenges the viewer to reconsider the resources right in front of them. Cafecito cups are now art material. And so one cafecito cup may not seem like much. It could be insignificant, but together they're making up this beach scene. And so similarly, your journey towards higher education, any goal of yours, is a bunch of little pieces coalescing together. And so Miami itself is a beautiful city, but it's made up of individual people with their unique backgrounds and experiences adding to the whole city. And so we have the why. Miami is a beautiful city, rich in resources and culture. And we have the what, the cafecito cups, using something literally right in front of you to tell the story. And then we have the how, 2,800 cafecito cups. And it's this idea of individual cups coming together to make a bigger picture. And so we have the completed picture. Now, could this piece have been made with mini canvases or pieces of paper or Post-its or whatever? Absolutely. But it would not have the same meaning that the materials, the cafecito cups, add to it. So it just, I like to keep that in mind, that shift of always considering the additional meaning your materials have. And so then the last series I want to talk about was my COVID-inspired series, Unseen Threat. And the backstory is very obvious. We were all dealing with COVID. And I started it in March and April of last year. And that was a time where everything was just beginning. I think we were just in lockdown. And a lot of information was going around, a lot of misinformation and everything in between. So for me, I was really trying to understand what was going on around me. How do I visualize this COVID and its spread? So, but at the same time, I really wanted to give a reminder that in the midst of all this panic and all these unprecedented times, that there's really nothing new under the sun, and that generations before us have dealt with far worse, and so that this would pass. I wanted there to be a sense of hope. And so look at where we are today. We have the vaccine, we're almost maskless. Like it's a good time. It's kind of weird to look at this project now after so much time, but remembering when I was making it, it was so much uncertainty. So when I was making it, I knew for sure that the project needed to be digital because we were in lockdown. Who knew if galleries were going to open again, what the world was going to look like. And so then I really was talking about this generations past. So I wanted to take the old and mix it with the new. So I began researching archives for vintage photos. And this turned out perfect because I was finding all these photos, and if captioned correctly, it was like they were doing everything we were doing. We have the TikTok videos that went viral. We have everybody and their mother doing lawn work, back to homeschooling, bike riding. There was a national shortage of bicycles because everyone out got bikes. We have couples cooking. I don't know how many Instagram videos I saw of that.
I know.
And then we have the Netflix binge watching, tutorials on haircuts. I mean, it was tempting, and we were in lockdown for a while. And even churches had to pivot. They were doing online services, online communion. And the restaurants, of course, had to do takeout only for a while there. And so for this series, the why, that there's nothing new under the sun, and that this too shall pass, was informing my use of the vintage photos with the COVID spreading dots as a way to visualize the virus. And my how was the digital dissemination of the materials. So I hope that you can see through those 3 projects, the why, what, how, and how it ties the work together. And I heard there's some art students in the class, it's not a class, in the waiting room. So I wanted to give some words of advice and say that, 1, remember that it's a journey, not a formula. You're in art school and you're deepening and widening your practice, but that doesn't necessarily always translate into practical real world experience. So when you get out there, just remember that it's not going to be a formula, that your path, your art path, is going to be unique to yourself, and enjoy the journey. Don't rush it, and don't get frustrated with it. Realize that it's a beautiful process, because just as your work can only be made by you, so your journey can only be taken by you. Also wanted to say, be aware, but don't compare. There's a lot, be totally aware of what's going on around you. Always be looking at artwork, looking at what people are doing, what's happening, but don't let it be a source to pollute your individual work and your message that you want to convey. You have to keep your authentic self. And so be aware, but don't let it pollute your voice. And then I shouldn't have to say this, but you should get in the studio, and magic happens in the studio. There's absolutely no shortcut for it. You've got to put in the time, but it's so worth it, because there's been so many times where maybe you didn't feel like going in, but you did it. You went in there, you went to work, and something magical happened. And so get in the studio. And so that is my presentation. Thank you all for attending. And now, Clay, I turn it back to you.
Well, thank you so much. I love all of your work, but I like the last series. What is the title of that series about?
Unseen Threat?
Yeah, I really like that, because it really does speak to what we went through, and it was a different time, and you did such a wonderful job with that. One of the things I wanted to see, you talk about your approaches with, is it the who?
So why, what, how?
Why, what, how? You talk about that when you're making art. Now, do you ever just go in the studio and play around without any idea what you're going to do, or is it always that in the back of your mind?
No, I think play is a huge part of any practice. I encourage it. I've read books that encouraged it. I absolutely, play is that is like what creates the file cabinet. When you're playing, you may not have something finished, but now you know, okay, this is a tool for later use. How can I push this? And it will feel, so maybe it's not ripe for something right now, but it's definitely in that toolbox through play.
Right. And experimentation. Okay. I would like to, when did you realize, seriously start thinking, I'm an artist? I'm going to go to art school and be an artist. When did that happen for you?
So I was an undecided major in college, and I took a drawing course with Clive King in my undergraduate, and that
Oh,
changed the course of my whole life, where I realized art was much more than I ever thought it was. And then I was also told by another professor that when you are in school, you are not an artist, you are an art student. So that was a huge relief. And so then you became an artist once you graduated, and then you had the weight on your shoulders to continue to be an artist, to go into the studio, to continue making art, and to figure out your journey. I don't know if that answered your question.
I've heard that quote before, and I'm not sure who says it at FI, but I read it recently that Joseph Albers used to say that to his students at Black Mountain, that he would tell them that you're not an artist until you graduate. You're a student right now.
Yeah, I think it was great advice. It stuck with, and um, there was something like really relieving about it. It was like there was nothing to prove. I was there to learn, and it was okay.
So I know you were working on the one FIU, you're working on that. I think that was during the pandemic. If I remember, was it like November, December you were working on
It
that?
was October, and we had to finish. I literally had a month for it, so it was the whole month of October.
Right. And talk about or share with us how you worked through the pandemic. You had your own studio. Did you have exhibitions closed, or how were you working through that, or what was your practice then?
So I actually, that's when I had the commission for the airport, and I was in the process of making the work, and it was a stop and go. It was like, well, we don't know. So I just continued making the commission for the airport because I just felt like it was going to be made anyway, and it all worked out because then it got shown. But the commission for the airport was supposed to be up for Art Basel, and then that was canceled, obviously. So I continued working. I just felt um, I was working on what I had. I didn't start making new work until I felt I had something to say, which was the COVID inspired series. And after that, it was just working on commissions. But that's what I did. Continued working. It was really helpful to just keep going.
I have a couple comments. Everybody loves your work, of course. Why wouldn't
Thank
they?
you.
They love it. They think you're very intrained. Your practice is very. One person is asking, what was the name of the 3 series again? If you could just repeat that.
So the first series is Touch from Above, and that's the one that looks like the frosting. The FIU commission project was Beautifully Miami, and the COVID inspired series is Unseen Threat.
Now, Touch from Above, that was the exhibition for the airport, correct?
Well, it's a whole series, like
Okay.
that's part of it, and
Okay.
then it was shown at the airport.
Okay. Okay. You can stop sharing your screen now. I'm sorry.
Better?
I want to open it up to any questions. If anyone has any questions or comments, they could put it in. Someone's interested in your fiber work? Are you still working in embroidery? Or I know you had made a beautiful work here with sequence. Are you still working in those, or?
Yeah, I am working on them. Certain projects take precedence. So it's still happening. It's just in the background.
Are you have any projects right now that you're working on for any upcoming exhibitions, or what's your next
Well,
idea?
I have a solo show in March of 2022 with Ryan James in Washington State. So I'm in that lovely process of editing and figuring out what I'm going to show and pulling that together and pulling the trigger on making those new works.
Excellent artwork, great speaker. Thank you. Someone said so.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk a little bit about? I know you mentioned Clive King was one of your professors who really made an impression on you? Is there any other people or artists or mentors that have influenced you in your practice?
For sure. Well, I think a major part were the professors at FIU. Professor McGuire was a huge part. I feel like every time he speaks, he doesn't even have to speak. Just sitting in his presence in his class is like, I felt like I was getting revelations. I don't know how. It's just like, he just, any students out there, you've got to take classes with them. It's going to change your life. He's always had just words of wisdom to say and saying the right thing at just the right moment that I needed to hear. Professor Pip Brandt has been amazing. And I remember her saying stuff to me in undergraduate, and I was just like, it didn't quite click. And then after I graduated, it was like, it all clicked. And I was like, oh, that's what she's talking about. Oh. And so just the professors at FIU are truly passionate about what they do, and they're really invested in their students. And I'm a recipient of their knowledge. Professor Yasek, he was there from day one. And so he's always been there to bounce off ideas and everything. Even in my master's program, we had at the last minute a professor change, and Professor Yolanda Sanchez came in. She really worked with us through our thesis. It's just been an amazing experience with the professors I've had at FIU. They just really challenge you, and it's very personal to what you need. So.
Thank you. Yep, I agree. Agree with all those professors. You started out as a painter, or what was your first medium of choice? What were you doing when you first?
That's why I loved FIU, and it was just like, don't limit yourself. What is your idea? And so that like blew my mind, because it was all about, what is it you are trying to convey? Why are you even painting? Is that even the appropriate means to convey that idea? So I was always, if you will, mixed media, or whatever you want to call it. I don't like boxes. I don't like titles. So I like to float in that other space.
Okay. Earlier you had spoke. I remember when you got your motorcycle, but I didn't know. So was that photography that you were doing on the road?
Okay, but it's not. I'm not a photographer. I'm an artist who uses photography.
Okay. Okay. But that was photography, right? That was.
It was photography, but I'm not a photographer.
Okay. Right. Okay. But you're an artist who uses photography.
Yes.
Talk about a little bit about. I know that our paths have crossed many times. We have never actually worked together. I've always been in like an administrative background position, but I've never curated anything with you. But we've been in many. You were part of Art Table. You were part of another art organization that I know of. You were working in exhibitions in Fort Lauderdale at Art Serve. So you're always very busy and out and about. Can you talk a little bit about how important it is or not important to network or being out there and seeing other artwork and being with other artists?
It's a very important, and I am what you would, I guess, consider a first generation artist. I didn't have like a mom artist or a dad artist or an uncle or a grandfather artist who could kind of show me the ropes or give me that type of network or connection. So everything where I am today is from the School of Hard Knocks, and getting out there, making connections, meeting people, goal setting, and trying to figure out ways to get that goal to be achievable. And so I am a firm believer that art is communication and that it's made to be shared. And so I don't make artwork for it to be in a vacuum. So it's very important for me to get that artwork out there. And so I have to get out there so it can get out there. And that's just kind of how I approach it.
You are always out there. I see you everywhere. When we were
you.
before pre-pandemic, and hopefully soon, even during the pandemic, I saw you here at FIU. So I'm sure again out in the world. Talk a little bit about your process. Like what is like, do you find most satisfying about your work, or something that you don't really enjoy? about what you're doing, or is that even a thing?
Oh, for sure. There's like, okay, so are we talking about just making the work? Because I enjoy that, like I said earlier, that peace and quiet that I've created for myself. Um, I've created boundaries where I could get that peace and quiet and get in the zone. I really enjoy being in that flow zone where I am just making the work. The time flies. I don't even realize how long I've been in the studio. And it's intense work and it's labor intensive, but it is so fulfilling. And like it's tough. And sometimes it could be physically tough. But at the end of the day, like I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I love what I do. And the not fun stuff is the typical, like I'm gonna sound like every other artist, like filling out applications,
Mm.
redoing slides, like, of course that's not fun, but you gotta do it.
Do you is writing about your art part of your practice?
Absolutely. It it's a love-hate relationship. I don't feel that I'm the greatest writer. And so I always feel like I come up short in the words. And for a long time, it was like one of those, like, if I could write about the work, why am I making the work? That was like my undergraduate thought. And then you realize like that's really naive. And when I looked at it as kind of like another window into the work, what do I want viewers to know? How can I make this more accessible? What's the cheat sheet for them? Um, it became a lot easier. And then I found that through the writing, I was able to refine actually what I was trying to say. So it's less of a battle for me, and I actually enjoy it more. It's still challenging for me to do, but I enjoy it more.
Thank you. I have a question. One person asking, what do you listen to while you're making art? Podcasts, music, audiobooks? Are you reading any? What are you reading right now?
So when I make my work, it's all of the above. Sometimes it's music. Um, Sometimes it's like one album, and it's kind of crazy because like memories are associated with music. So then when I hear that album, it's like I know what piece I was making when I was listening to that. I do like podcasts, all sorts. Trying to think. Um, of course, I don't have my phone with me, so I can't tell. But I do like listening to podcasts and hearing different people's perspectives and music for sure. I do listen to audiobooks. There was this series by a man called Uwe. That was one of the books I was listening to. It was just so whimsical and cute. And so I would listen to like this author's whole, like as many books as I could get on audiobook while I was working. So it all depends on my current mood. Sometimes I need music and sometimes I want to hear a podcast. So it varies.
How do you is there certain artists that you're following, or
I
contemporary
follow a lot.
artists, or is there someone in the, the canon that really speaks to you, or
There are a lot in the canon that speak to me. I know I feel like it's always controversial and I always have to like caveat it, but I do like Damien Hirst. I do like Jeff Koons. I do like those guys as well as other process oriented artists. There's just a lot of people that I look to for different things and for different reasons. Maybe Jeff Koons for the colors and things like that, and Damien Hirst for his there's a lot of repetition in his work, and his use of materials is very inspiring. John Baldessari, his just his views, reading like the things that he said about play, and just it's hearing artists like that just makes me feel like they get it. I'm at home.
me and you had discussed this, and I hope you don't mind me asking it. We had discussed earlier about this process where some of these museums are talking about their collection for certification. And when they're talking about their collection, they're categorizing how many women or men are in the collection. And we're finding out it's about 30% is what we're finding out, which it's not a lot. Um, And so there's this new practice that some museum have implemented where they are asking the artists to self-identify what they are. So how do you feel about that practice? What do you think about it? Or I was just,
So I know we discussed it, and I went back and I thought about it, and I don't have a problem identifying, self-identifying. And we talked about, like, is this after they purchase the work or before? It's a very tricky and layered issue. And so I think for me personally, it gets back to um, the use of qualifiers. And for women in particular, I know we're trying to even the gap, like fill the gap, and I know that that needs to be done. And the way it gets done can sometimes feel a little wrong or a little muddy, if you will. And so it's the use of qualifiers that really kind of gets me, like, a woman's show. Why can't it be a show that just happens to feature all women? I always want or have the hope, and maybe it's idealistic, but I really hope that it's my work, the merit of the work that's getting me somewhere, not my what I identify as. And so it's tricky, it's layered, it's complicated, but that's what I just feel like, how if we keep using the qualifiers, how are we evening things out?
right. No, I think I agree with you. I think it's a very complicated issue that, we all have to navigate the right way. But I think, yeah, the way you're saying or sharing your opinion, I think it's valid for sure. So we have time for a couple more questions. One, I wanted to ask you, how do you think your work has evolved in the last few years since you graduated with your degree? Has it?
I think it's I don't know if it evolved or solidified would be more of an accurate term for me. I think when I went into the graduate program, and it was a time for me to kind of just focus and really understand what I was doing and why I was making it. And I came out of that program achieving that goal of being able to say, like, no apologies for the work. Like, this is my work. This is why I do it. This is whose shoulders I'm standing on. This is who I'm standing next to. And to truly just understanding, taking that time, those 3 years to understand, what am I doing? Why am I making this? And being able to have answers and instead of apologies.
Um, Wonderful. And can you talk about your artwork behind you that we've been admiring?
Uh, so this is from the Touch series, but I'm taking it off of the square, which I love working on the squares and the rectangles, but I'm trying to take it out of its shape and kind of talking about that, like, initial, like, if someone just threw that, like, kindness at you, what would it be? And so that's kind of what I'm
I
just
love
playing
it.
around with. Thank you.
Well, I love your kindness series. I love all of your work. So, but I really remember that as what I think it may be my, oh, I can't say that because I really like the new work that you're doing too. So I love all your work. So I'll just say
Thank you very much.
one more thing. We're going to wrap it up, but thank you. But I wanted we have students with us. So if you have one good piece of advice for student artists or any students, what would that be?
Well, I did go over the 3 tips there, and the most important one is, I believe, getting in the studio. There's just no shortcut. Get your butt in the studio.
Do the work. Do the
Do
work.
the work. Do the work.
Yeah, yeah. I have one. How's the Ducati? Oh, is that the?
Oh. That's the
That's
motorcycle.
from Bill. Bill's on the call.
It's in the garage. Let's just say that.
Is that the motorcycle?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I remember when you were doing that. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So, that's cool. So I'm gonna thank you again, Gianna. It's always great to talk to you. I love your work. I've always looked forward to seeing your work and seeing you. So I'm gonna go ahead and unmute everyone. If everybody would just like to say hello to Gianna and give oops, instead of unmuting them, unmuting them, ask all to unmute and they can say hello and a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gianna.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will see you in 2 weeks. Next is next Monday is Memorial Day. So we will be back the following week with the curator, Chen Shui, and she will talk about her practice. So thank you again, Gianna.
All right,
Everyone,
bye.
have a great evening.